Hi, I'm Kate from Hudson Lab School, and I'm honored to introduce Christine Boyer from Heathcote Elementary School. She's going to present make writing tips to help parents with their emerging writers.
I've mentioned it throughout the slides, but I'm just going to say it again that all of this work is inspired by Angela Stockman's work. And if you aren't familiar with her make writing, I put some links in there and the title of her two books, Make Writing and then Hacking the Writing Workshop. She's pretty phenomenal. And when you spend a weekend with her or an afternoon with her, it's really inspiring to see how without using a pencil, paper, computers, or anything that has to do with text, you actually get kids to create some of the most beautiful writing through their making. All right, I'm going to get started. I'll share my slideshow with you all. This is just some tips that I've put together from some things I've been doing over the years. I'm really just reached back into my own photo albums to find some of the things that have worked the best with my fifth graders, because I was teaching fifth grade up until last year for about 20 years, and then came back to third grade with the opportunity to loop with the kids to fourth grade and potentially even fifth. So this is a slide just talking about children being natural storytellers and how they love to tell their stories. They love to share their stories. And if you ever have a morning meeting with any age group of kids, just starting on a Monday, they can talk about their weekends, nonstop, and then giving them loose parts and asking our parents to have these loose part collections within their homes. Lots of things they can find in their homes, either inside or directly outside, finding ways to put their parts together in meaningful ways and purposeful ways. Corks, this makes me laugh because I feel like we might all be growing big cork collections these days. So save those at home for your maker spaces when you go back to school. And things that could potentially be a body for a person or a character in their stories, like a pine cone. The acorns could be younger or smaller people or little animals. And I mean, children's imagination really can just take these pieces anywhere, but connectors are important too. Like a rubber band can be a connector to join two materials together, or pipe cleaners. Bottle caps are really fun because they come in so many different sizes and shapes and colors, and they could be used as parts that might roll or parts that stack. So just thinking about all the different things that the parts can do and building a collection around that and being able to use them to make multiple layers of a story. And then here, why make writing works. That I have seen many kids over the years, and I think back to one specifically, a boy, Sam, many, many years ago. He didn't like to write, but he loved to talk and he loved to make. And he eventually helped me put our makerspace together in Heathcote, and he learned how to take our MakerBot. He learned how to set it up, take it apart, and fix it. And he was probably the only one in the building who could, because he had so much patience and so much interest. And it really got me to thinking about the passion that drives our kids. And that became his writing. He wrote a how to take the MakerBot apart, how to troubleshoot different problems, how to put a makerspace together so that you're reaching the needs of a K-5 population. And thinking about leading workshops for younger kids, he was a very frustrated fifth grader at the time, but the most patient child when he was teaching a kindergarten class how to make little brush bots. So you really see a different part of kids when they get to make and build and show that part of themselves. So, and this is a line from embodied cognition, is a phrase I learned from Lisa Yocana years ago. And it is a real thing. Like, we all like to make, to learn, and with our hands to build. And here I put Angela Stockman's Twitter, because she has been my biggest inspiration in all of this work. And I put a little side note here that I talk about he, because I have two boys and I'm talking about a lot of things that I've done with my own children. So when I say start with him or her, I mean start with him or he. No offense to the ladies out there or the little girls out there. It's just writing from my own perspective. Okay. And I'm encouraging parents to start with some walks, take their children outside. And instead of a why question, because that can sometimes freeze a child and say, why would you do that? What are you thinking? Why? Just tell me more about that. And that's a very simple invitation that sort of gets kids talking a whole lot more. Or how might you show that with these parts? How might these pine cones be people? just different ways of phrasing the conversation. And absolutely taking photos. Everybody goes everywhere with a phone these days. So taking pictures of everything that you do, or not everything, obviously it would take away from the walk, but taking photos along the way of different collections of things that you notice. I walk the Bronx River just about every day for the past 4 weeks. And this past week, I noticed the trees look different. The buds are coming out, the way the branches are reaching out, it looks more like lots of angles. And then I started thinking about the Bronx River in terms of geography. So maybe because I'm always planning lessons and what can I put online that might be relatable to my students, but you do start to notice things differently. And then taking those photos as a reference point for later really is important. And then a See, Think, Wonder is a thinking routine from Harvard's Project Zero. And if you're not familiar with that, I included a link here. It's one of the simplest routines, but really very, very valuable. And I was listening to a webinar with the Smithsonian art educators this morning, and they were using the See, Think, Wonder routines to ask the children to look at art pieces in this way, because you're really trying to separate the way that you are seeing and thinking and when you're looking at something. And see is really something that you can physically, tangibly touch and see with your own two eyes, instead of saying, if you're looking at a painting of a girl who has dough in her hands, instead of saying she's making pie, that would be the think. I think she's making a pie, and save the inferences for the think part. And see is really that I see a girl, I see dough in her hands, I see a kitchen. So it's really what you could physically see. And then the wonderings are left for the children's questions, and they always have really fascinating questions. And using that, looking at your own photographs, or looking at different materials. And I talk a little bit about that in one of the other slides. And just really doing a See, Think, Wonder around specific materials is kind of fascinating as well. And then using the inspirations to build a story about the walk. What was your favorite part of the walk? What did you learn something today? And have them retell that story, build that using the loose parts that they've put together, and retell it and revise. One of the things that I've realized in some of the readings that I've come to see is that our hands can build and revise a story so much faster, even as grown-ups. And this is true, I think, for everyone, that we can revise something with our hands so much faster than our brains can do it to get our hands to print. So a child can rebuild a story part and reposition loose pieces to change a part of a story to match what's in their head faster than how they could do it with actual print. And the visualization piece is huge with our youngest readers and writers. And Post-its, they become a really great loose part themselves, and you'll see that in some of the photos that I have. So these are just a few suggestions for brainstorming lists of favorite places. Why is a place so special? What happened there? Can you tell me about that? And connecting memories and really getting to those smallest moments. And this is from some of my students this year. These are third graders. And he was building here, talking about his somebody. We also used the story arc of somebody wanted but so. And he was building here part of being in his, what did he say? I'm in my house, in my living room, and they're watching TV, and you can see how we use the corks, some buttons, different Jenga blocks and clothespins. And the people are the colorful little clothespins with the pom-poms on top. And this was one of my favorites. Alexa is a struggling reader and writer, an 8-year-old. And she was talking about a time she had gone to Times Square with her dad, and she loved going to Manhattan to visit and go there for the day with her dad because she remembers living there. She had just moved up to Scarsdale when she was in first grade. So she remembers Times Square vividly and loves going to visit. And when she was building Times Square, you could see these bottles. These here are the buildings, and her Post-its are her billboards, making the big announcements all through Times Square. And this is the part that you could, where you can walk and sit down. And she chose materials very specifically, thinking about how sparkly Times Square is, the lights that are there, and how people, like the nighttime there, and everything is just so vibrantly lit up. And oh, and this is the crowds waiting at the corners to cross. And just building this and talking about it, and she used her iPad to take a picture. We do have a one-to-one with the iPads, so she took an iPad and uploaded this to Seesaw. And the beauty of loose parts is they go back into our loose parts library, where we have buckets of, or bins of pom-poms, or bins of straws, bins of clothespins, and so on. And the parts could be reused and recycled. So it also is very sustainable type of building where nothing is getting glued together. There's no hot glue, there's no tape. And by taking a photograph and putting it into Seesaw, she has this to be able to inform her writing for days to come. And this was a soccer game that one of my students built, and you could see here is the goalie and the different participants on the field. And some children are very comfortable with only 3 or 4 different materials, where others like to go bigger and use a whole lot more. When I first came up to Isabella and was talking with her about her campsite, I wasn't sure what it was at first, but her story grew and grew over days as she remembered getting to this campsite and setting up the tent and the rain starting to fall. And then it went back to the long car ride just to get there. And then she built on the arrival of getting to the campsite, meeting friends there who were arriving with their dads because it was a dad-daughter weekend. And back here, there was a pool on the campground where they went to swim during the day over the weekend. This was their campfire. So it just grew and grew the more that she had the opportunity to talk and tell her story. Obviously, in a classroom, they can turn and talk to one another, and the children have each other to revise their stories with, or their teachers. That might have myself and 2 aides in the classroom. And at home, it's a little bit of a different story. They'll have to, maybe a sibling, maybe parents, or recording themselves and listening back to it and sharing it with their teachers online through Zoom sessions. And loose parts portraits were really quite fascinating. And I wasn't sure how this was going to go early in the school year, but you could see, I mean, look at that facial expression. That is just fabulous. And thinking about how a pine cone is now a body with this great big yarn head. And the kids thought it was fabulous to make these cartoonish type figures of themselves. And a lot of writing came out of this, not only about themselves and how they see themselves, but what types of materials that they chose and why they chose that specific material. And then if we think of this just as characters, what emotions are you portraying in your build? And how could you change one thing here to change those emotions? And really just thinking about the eyebrows and how those 2 little sticks can go from here to here, and it changes everything. And then it can change emotions in a story as well. So this was really talking about just a setting. You can focus in on a story once the children start working on a narrative or a fiction story, even something that they're making. And in this case, it was a narrative. And let's just build the setting, really thinking about that big picture that you did the other day. Now, where did it take place? What was so special about that? And zoom in on one part of it. Because in their minds, they can zoom in very easily, but that doesn't always translate to print very easily. So then being able to bridge this build to print by having the option of labeling in Seesaw or writing directly on a desk with an Expo marker, those come off right away, or using Post-its. And the Post-its really become great for labeling and then eventually being the bridge to longer print. And this materials matters. I thought this was a great video. I saw this morning. I don't know if you know, if any of you are on Twitter. Julie Rains on Twitter. If you're not following her, follow her. She's amazing. And she has just started putting up a series of little videos, and mostly for her school, but obviously they're public, and getting people to really think about making and how that is translating to the homeschooling environment. And here I wrote a little bit about having a variety of materials. And when we first started to put our loose parts together at school, we knew it was important to have lots of different, not only shapes, but things, having materials that were pliable. How can something bend? How can you roll it? How can something be twisty or even squishy? Something that's thicker or thinner, things that stack easily, really thinking about as many attributes as possible in building this collection. And I want to share this with you quickly because it's really quite spectacular. Hopefully it will load. And you can see she makes just quick short videos.
Everyone, and welcome to our next making challenge. We're going to do something called a materials exploration. In a materials exploration, you're going to take some time to play, tinker with, and explore various materials to see what they might want to become. You can make something or not. Try out some of the materials on the list that we're going to share below from Agency by Design, or find your own ideas and materials. Right now, you can see that I have a piece of tinfoil. So what I could do in my materials exploration is I could take apart the tinfoil. I could roll it. I might fold it. And play around with this material to see what I could make out of it. And that's kind of part of the challenge as well. So after you take time to notice what the materials can do, how they move, how they take shape, maybe the differences between different materials, how you can attach them, what other tools you might need, or any other observations, you can try and play a little game called This Is Nada. Now, when you're playing the game This Is Nada, what you do is you take something and you try and think about what else it could be. This is not a piece of tinfoil. This is a straw. This is not a straw, it's a magic wand. This is not a magic wand, it's a rolled up sleeping bag that I can use for my camping trip. So the fun thing is you can see how many ideas you can come up with to make whatever it is you're playing with or tinkering with something else. Then feel free to share your thinking on our Padlet on our website. So the Padlet is just a place that you can click. You don't have to sign in or anything. And you can share your thinking and you can share a picture of your materials exploration. You can also reflect. You can think about what are some new ideas you have about using these materials to make something. What are some questions you have now that you have had time to see what these materials might become? RCS makers, we really look forward to hearing about your materials explorations this week. Have fun making.
Okay, so Julie was talking specifically to her school, the RCS, but if you follow her on Twitter, you can see her whole list of different videos in there where she's posting lots of little quick 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes of different maker activities that translate to making at home. And then there's some resources here. Angela Stockman, obviously, this is her website. She's got tons of different really cool blog posts up there, and then some other thinking about loose parts. Let's see. I think this one is just her website about resistant writers, making and unmaking, looking at resistant writers, print, privilege, and power. She's just amazing. And then here talking about leveraging loose parts. This is a great article here. And then down here, Making Thinking Visible with Ron Richard. He's one of the principal partners in the Project Zero thinking routines in creating those. And this is his book. I listened to it on audio tape when I went to Pittsburgh several months. Oh my God, it seems like forever ago. It was a long ride, so I was able to finish the book there and back. So that's kind of it. That's the end of the slides. I just put together a few tips to be able to share with you. And now you have the slideshow to ponder through as well. And hopefully some of that translates to you, your online work, your families, and something you could share with parents.
Thank you, Christine. That's so helpful, and you are fabulous. So given we're all distance learners right now, what do you recommend for parents who want to help their kids to transition from building to writing?
I think one of the first things that we all have to keep in mind with this distance type learning is compassion before curriculum. So if anybody's really feeling frustrated, it's okay to walk away from something, and we have to let our parents know that that's okay too. So it's almost like, I think Angela had said we were crisis teaching in a way. But in the make writing, one of the best things about that is just going back to it over and over. When children build with Legos, they could stick with one Lego. I know my own boys did for 2 or 3 days, adding to it, reiterating, adding another character. And then if you sit and take the time to talk with a child, the easiest way to get something started is to say, hey, you know what, we are going to do a writing activity around this. And I would love for you to be able to share that writing with others. And that means we're going to have to either take a video of it or put something into print, maybe write a small poem or whatever the writing activity is for that particular day and time. And a parent could just simply start the transition for the child. Tell me 3 things about this. You know, what do you remember most about the walk that we took? Why, what is this part of your build? What is that referencing? And write down 3 words on a Post-it and leave those for your child to add to. How can you expand on that would be the next level. So some children, in order to make that initial bridge to print, they actually need someone to do that for them, and they need that support. If they could do it on their own, then you can leave them with 3 Post-its and say, hey, why don't you think about the beginning, middle, and end, and tell me one thing about each part of this story that you're building. Or if they're building just the setting, tell me 3 things about the setting. And if it's a character, some of those character strengths. How would you describe that character? And then leave 1 or 2 Post-its behind for the child to actually start writing there.
And one follow-on question, what do you recommend for parents of 5th grade writers?
One of the things that I loved about teaching 5th grade is that when I learned about using storyboards, it was really one of the coolest things ever. Thinking about a larger piece of cardboard, or even the dining room table became a storyboard at times when my older son was writing his essays for college. And it's a way of just organizing the thinking. If you're looking at a story arc of somebody wanted but so, those become your columns. And then you could put in the parts of that. You know, who's your somebody, and describe that in detail. What did they want, and how would you describe that in detail? 1 or 2 words per Post-it is a lot less intimidating and easier to sort of execute in one sitting than having to have 1 piece of blank paper and write that whole story out at one time. And the storyboard also, if you're thinking about nonfiction writing, if you have 3 essential questions that you're trying to investigate about sharks or weather, the question itself becomes the column. And as the children are reading and taking notes, they can post their notes in 1 small little note at a time in each column.
Could you expand on the somebody wanted but so then?
But so in a typical story, there's, you know, even if you think about all fairy tales, if you think about a Little Red Riding Hood, you know, somebody wanted but so then. Somebody is your main character. And you could, well, and Little Red Riding Hood is interesting because you could do it from 2 perspectives. We've seen all those stories. And if you think about Little Red being the somebody, what did she want? And then, but then you're leading into the problem. What happened? What's the problem there? And then, so how did they overcome that problem? And then how did they, you know, continue on in the story, or what happened as a result of that? And one of the best things that I had learned to sort of develop that story arc with our 5th graders several years ago was using Disney's Pixar shorts, because they're wordless and they're really a whole lot of fun. And if you're not familiar with them, definitely look them up. Really getting children to understand the importance of expressing the emotions and telling the details, because if they can make an entire short film in 5 minutes that has an entire story in it with no words, then, you know, really understanding how their details are important.
Thank you so much. This was awesome. Just a couple questions. I'm curious about, mostly like when it gets to like slightly older kids and they start using other kind of digital storytelling tools, like you know, with like movie making and things like that. So oftentimes, like at portfolio school, like I'll be doing like videos with somebody, and they just kind of want to go into, let's just make the movie, right? And you know, they kind of you kind of have to slow them down and get them to this part, which is like, you know, you have your main character, exactly what you're talking about. There's a character who wants something, there's an obstacle, and then the resolution. And I'm wondering if you see, I don't know, the beyond the loose parts, like how you take this and then start working with other kind of digital storytelling tools.
Well, one of the things that we do a lot of different types of movie making, from stop motion to using WeVideo to iMovie was big in the 5th grade several years ago. Now with Chromebooks, we use WeVideo a lot more. But when the kids are making their movies, they need a script first, and you need a really good, believable character. If you're writing a movie and you want people to understand your character, you have to build that character to translate what's in your head to the screen. And the steps in between are really important, whether you're building that character out of loose parts, sketching that character out in with physical, just sketch with pencils, or a word sketch, just listing all the attributes of that character and how you would describe that person. And I think each time they have an opportunity, a child has an opportunity to retell their story. There's so much storytelling involved before the cameras actually start rolling, that you sort of reiterate as you go along the way. And in school, obviously, they work in teams. So they might catch each other and say, oh, you were just talking about how brave he is. We didn't use that word over here at all. Let's think about how can we show that bravery. So kids will catch each other. But in the home setting, it's a little bit different. So having sort of a working knowledge or an understanding of how to build a character really strongly and explain a setting and use a script, because no movie is being made without a script. And it is that ability to, it all starts with storytelling, every type of writing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it's helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Christine. If there are no other questions, then I guess that wraps us up. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate this.
Well, you're so welcome. And if anyone has any questions, you can always just reach me, because I'm home. I'm not going anywhere for a while. And my email is, Kate has my email and she could give you that. And Angela is also on Twitter. You can always reach out to her. For anyone with older kids in the middle school, I also recommend Dan Ryder. He's in Massachusetts, Ryder. He's wicked decent on Twitter, but if you just type in his name, he'll come up. And he does a lot of amazing work using the make writing strategies with his middle school kids. So that's really, he's very cool to follow and to learn from him as well. So.
Christine, are you going to send the slides with the links?
Yeah, Kate will share all of that.
Great.
I'll make it all public so everybody can see it.
Thanks.
So anyway, all right. Well, thank you, everyone. And good luck with everything. And if you want to connect for anything, I'd share ideas or just, you know, say hi.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Take care, everyone.
Bye. Thanks so much.
Bye.